Cloudcast Media. Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg with Cloudcast Media. We're pleased to have in the studio with us today Nancy Batterman. She's an executive coach and nonprofit strategist for Proactive Leadership Group. How you doing, Nancy?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for coming in. We're going to chat about your book about nonprofits. Whenever I hear about nonprofits, my eyes light up. I started working with nonprofits way before you were born, I'm sure, in 1984.
Oh, wow.
With the Greater
I wish I was born in 1984.
Yeah, right. At the Greater San Diego Reading Association. We're joined by my guest co-host, Kristen Blake. She's a public relations and community affairs consultant. Kristen, you got a question right out of the gate for Nancy?
I do. Before we dive in, Nancy, can you share a little bit about the mission of your organization?
Sure. So I work with a group of executive coaches. It's an interesting partnership in that we each have our own individual business and we're based all over the country. So I have a colleague, the founder of Proactive Leadership Group in Dallas, Texas. And then his first partner was Bill Napolitano, and he's in Massachusetts. And then we have a colleague, Julie, in Pennsylvania. And then Darren is also in Texas. And then I'm obviously in San Diego and kind of really represent the nonprofit community.
No, that's great. How'd you get into nonprofits? Did you join? Were you on boards? Did you work for one? All of the above?
So I worked for Options for All for over 30 plus years. In fact, that's how I met you when I was CEO of that organization.
That's all coming back to me. That's all coming back. 30 years, my goodness.
Yeah. So, and then Mike actually convinced me to leave the organization after 34 years to work with nonprofits in a new and different way. So that led to the executive coaching.
Yeah, well, listen, I think anyone that is working with a nonprofit really understands the field. I think the biggest misnomers, Nancy, about it is that people don't understand, nonprofits contribute a lot to the economy. And just think that because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean that they're not, whether it's people they're hiring or it's the programs they're supporting. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important for everyone, including nonprofits, to realize they're really businesses, right? And they need to act like a business. So I think that's really important. And they have a huge impact on the community, not only by the people they serve, by the employees that they employ, obviously. And there's some very large nonprofits, but have a huge impact in many different ways in the community. Absolutely.
Right. And it really depends on which study you're looking at. I was fortunate enough to be on the charter advisory board of Paula Cordero. And, Paula, of course, she's, started USD School of Leadership and Ed Sciences. And of course, the Nonprofit Institute is under Souls, and she's since moved on. But depending on what you look at, what is there, 8,000, 10,000 nonprofits in San Diego County, depending on which study you're looking at?
Yeah, I think closer to 10,000 these days. So yeah, absolutely.
And the significant majority of them, are very small. Don't bring in much revenue, if any revenue on this. But these folks are just the salt of the earth because their cause, their focus is, helping whatever this may be. And I think San Diego, and you'd probably be a good person to judge on this, does pretty well with nonprofits, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. A huge, diverse group of different nonprofits. That's been one of the exciting things about working with nonprofits in my new role, is to see the variety of nonprofits and the structures of the organization. Some very different structures that longtime volunteer organizations to organizations with lots of staff. So a huge range, but all having a great impact in San Diego and working really well together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's nice about nonprofits. if you don't work well together, you'll die a slow death because, working in a silo does not work with any organization for that matter, but definitely with nonprofits in that area. And they are very collegial. They want them to succeed. It benefits all nonprofits when all nonprofits succeed on this. So talk about this book, the Nonprofit Manifesto. When did you decide to write it? And what inspired you to do that?
So I've actually been writing it and developing it for over 10 years, probably 15, and have talked about it for a very long time. So I had chapters all outlined. And when LinkedIn became really popular, I used that forum to kind of test articles and concepts. And then I went to a conference last year, and we were challenged in my one-page strategic plan that I talk about in the book and really is the basis of my business. There's a 3-year highly achievable goal, and mine was to write my book. And I was at a conference last year, where May of 2024, where we were challenged to make our 3-year highly achievable goal our 1-year highly achievable goal. And so I took on that challenge, and that was in May of 2024, and the book launched in June of 2025.
Congratulations. This is your first book?
Yes, my first book.
How much advice did you get from colleagues of yours who have written books or authors and all that business? And, book publishing is not easy.
No, it is not easy. I talked with lots of people who had written books, particularly in the nonprofit sector, so I had a good idea of kind of wanted to have. And then I met with a ghostwriter that was spectacular and really gave me the framework and the help to pull everything together. And that, for me, because there's so many different ways to publish a book now. It's not, there's traditional ways, non-traditional ways, and the whole range in between. So it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
So what would you say differentiates this book, the Nonprofit Manifesto, from other books that make deal in this space, the nonprofits?
So I would say really the focus on it being about business and nonprofit leaders, both board members and the executive directors, CEOs, really making sure that they think about and consider their nonprofit a business. So it really talks about that focus. And a lot of tools that I use with my clients are really business tools that have been adapted for the nonprofit sector. So that's how it's really different, is really getting them to look at and think about their business from a business perspective.
Right, as they should. Kristen, any questions you have?
I do. And Nancy, I can appreciate the approach to have these working with these nonprofits more from a business lens, right, to really amplify their reach and their impact. Can you share a little bit about the one-page strategic plan?
Sure, absolutely. It is the reason I'm a coach. Mike Morrow was actually my executive coach when I was at Options for All, and he introduced me to the one-page plan. I had searched my entire career for an effective strategic planning process. Most nonprofits do strategic planning on a regular basis. And I, for years, like many nonprofits, developed these huge 25-page plans.
It's in the binder on the shelf.
Exactly. I think we age ourselves when we talk about them being in 3-ring binders on our shelves, but that's how it was.
That's how it was.
It's how it was, absolutely, for me too.
Yeah.
And we didn't do anything with them until a board member said, hey, what happened to that strategic plan? And the one-page plan is different. It's one page and includes everything that the nonprofit needs. But it's also operationalized. So we talk a lot about annual initiatives and then quarterly priorities, and making sure that the leaders are following up on a quarterly basis with that plan. And I found it to be so successful that it's what sold me to be a coach, because Mike said that if I was an executive coach, I could share the one-page plan with a lot more nonprofits than if I was just working with the one nonprofit. And so I took the big leap in 2019 and left the organization after 34 years and started my own business.
How's it going?
It's been great.
Good.
Great.
Good. Now, did it help having the street cred of being with Options for All? Yeah, of course it did.
Oh, absolutely. Several of my clients are in the intellectual and developmental disability field. So yep.
Do you, we have on our show, we love having folks from St. Madeline's come on.
Sure.
And Deborah Emerson is just a delight, and Terry and Noah Holmes and all that business, and we can't talk enough about that population.
Absolutely.
And certainly in some ways forgotten, should never be forgotten for that matter. Talk about the biggest shift you had to do from Options to All, running the organization, to now coaching.
I think the biggest shift is to help the nonprofits and the CEO, the leadership team, find their own answers, to ask really good questions. I had lots of advice, right? But that isn't really my role. My role as a coach is to help them find their own answers. And so that was a big shift for me. That and having to do my own business development. Right.
Exactly. And do you work with anybody else? Is it pretty much you, or do you have, an associate group?
It's pretty much me. So, so I work with all my clients, and it's interesting. I have a wide range. So the San Diego Food Bank is one of my clients, and obviously a larger. And then I have some smaller clients. So the Mount Helix Park Foundation, Deep Diamond Educational Excellence Program, a literacy program. So they're very small. So I have this huge range, which I found to be very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, our next guest is a literacy expert. Rachel Rose, coming from Words Alive.
Yes, so, I saw that on the agenda.
Right. She's sitting right in here listening to the interview and so forth. So we'd love to get her 2 cents on this, and I'll give her change back. And if we can do that as well. When we come back from break, let's go ahead, Nancy, talk a little bit more about the nonprofit coaching business, and almost maybe something I know Kristen's probably thinking about asking you as well, is that what advice would you give to people that say, hey, I want to do what Nancy did. I've done this for 25 years. Now I want to coach. What are the great things about it? What are some of the pitfalls? And then we always save time, Nancy, at the second half of the interview. What can our listeners do to support your efforts?
Okay.
One, buy the book, okay? And if you got any ideas of how you can support some nonprofits, Nancy would be happy to help out, as we're chatting with Nancy Batterman, executive coach and nonprofit strategist for Proactive Leadership Group. She's the author of Nonprofit Manifesto. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the nation's longest running community podcast. We're in our 19th year. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, 6 decades of doing great things for people living in San Diego County, whether it's food insecurity or whether it is financial literacy, arts, homelessness, you name it. They are there shoulder to shoulder with us. Folk living in San Diego County, joined by my guest co-host, Kristen Blake. She is a public relations and community affairs consultant, and we will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the nation's longest-running community podcast, brought to you by the fine folks of Mission Fed Credit Union. More than 6 decades of doing great things in San Diego County. So pleased to have in the studio with us Nancy Batterman. She's an executive coach and nonprofit strategist for a proactive leadership group. After a storied career with Options for All, I was fortunate enough to work with Nancy back in those days and written a book called Nonprofit Manifesto, joined by my guest co-host, Kristen Blake. She's the public relations and community affairs consultant. Kristen.
Nancy, you've had a captivating career so far, launching a new book. I would love to know more about your career coaching business and how have you taken what you've learned in your career so far and really have been able to help others? Sure.
It really started kind of my entree in with nonprofits is through strategic planning and the one-page strategic plan. And so it gives me an opportunity to learn about the organization. And so I just, once I decided I was going to do it, I let all of my colleagues know in San Diego that I was making a transition and that I was looking to work with organizations, particularly when organizations needed to do strategic planning. And it just kind of grew from there so that I'm doing a lot of strategic planning, which I love to do, and be able to introduce people to the one-page strategic plan. So it's been great.
Yeah, do you work with groups like the Fieldstone Leadership Group?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They're wonderful.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do. And I think groups like that, and of course, Nonprofit Institute of USD Souls, and what you're doing, people actually really want to help out, and we know how critical it is. And listen, one of the challenges is there's a lot of stuff going on 3,000 miles east of us, and some very, very serious impacts when there's some funds that are cut. And we know, maybe for the bigger nonprofits, they can, maybe soldier through it. For some of the small ones, they can't. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's been a tough time, I think, both federally and then at the state level with the struggles with the state budget.
Right.
It's really made it a challenging environment for nonprofits. So what I talk with in the book and when I talk with clients, it's really important about diversity and the diversity of funding. And so the more kinds and types of funding that nonprofits have, I think that just allows them to be able to kind of go with the flow of things. So when there's less federal funding, then they need to focus on if it's state funding or grants. To really diversify funding is important, and to have a plan, right? A strategic plan that you can lean into and help you guide the direction and where you're going. So, it's a tough time right now for nonprofits.
Yeah, and that hits what you're talking about, which is in your book. This is a business, and nonprofits are businesses. We all know that. But you really need to treat it, and of course, diversifying, your revenue. Whether you're an individual, and don't put all the money in McDonald's or whatever the case may be. But it makes all the sense in the world in this. Talk about, when you work with CEOs or executive directors of nonprofits, what is the question they ask you the most? Or is there one?
Oh, gosh. The question they ask me the most. I would say we do a lot of talking about staff and staff issues. I think that's the second biggest challenge right now and has been for quite a while for nonprofits. When the cost of hiring employees and the cost of minimum wage has continued to go up, it has really made it very challenging for nonprofits to compete in the marketplace for the best employees. And so that's outside of strategic planning, the whole personnel and dealing with staff and finding ways to recruit quality staff right now is one of the topics we spend a lot of time on, and building leadership teams.
Yeah, there's no question about it. For those folks who've been in the nonprofit world, they certainly understand what you were just saying, and Nancy, on this. Bigger companies, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, there's a little bit of wiggle room because when Joe Blow leaves, Joanne Blow can shoulder some of it. Well, at smaller ones, when Joe Blow leaves, you turn around and it's the CEO doing it, right?
Right.
And now the CEO is doing 10 of these things, plus the fact it's the CEO or executive director that is helping train the employees, right? So besides doing their other work, I mean, that comes with the territory. We all know that in that area. So that is, very critical on who you're hiring and so forth. Moving forward on that, what would you say that some of the biggest challenges are moving forward? We talked about some of the federal funds. What other challenges are there, and state funds?
So I think we talked about the funding and diversification.
Right.
But probably the other challenge is just really building a leadership team and building a strong leadership team. And I think that's a way to be able to keep people engaged with the organization, is to have a transparent organization and to share that with the leadership team and have them be involved in the collaborative decision-making of the nonprofit. And I think that excites employees when they're included in that process.
Talk about also, chatting with Nancy Batterman. She's the executive coach and nonprofit strategist for Proactive Leadership Group. I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. But the importance, we talked about a little bit on the first part of the show here, that collaboration. You're going to have to work together, because if there's 55 nonprofits all doing the same thing, it's just a matter of time. Talk about the collaboration.
Sure. I think it's really important to collaborate. As you said, there's quite a bit of duplication
Right.
In the nonprofit sector.
Right.
And so working together. I think the other thing that we're seeing is that granting organizations are more interested in funding collaborations and groups of nonprofits that are working together. And there's a greater opportunity to get larger grants if there's a collaboration among nonprofits. So I think it's highly important to help them with their funding. I think it also, donors like to see the collaboration and the working together. So collaborating with other nonprofits, I think, brings several different opportunities to the nonprofit.
Yeah, and what I'm happy to see now, having been involved with nonprofits for a long time, is that there are a lot of the foundations now, or the funders, are starting to understand that do not put a restriction on the funds the nonprofits get. They do need to run the organization. Yes, there can be some restrictions, but operation costs at no level where you have to sit there and say this is designated for X is huge. And now we're starting to see foundations understand that. Talk about it.
Yeah, capacity building, right?
Yes.
Yes, I agree. We've seen a transition for granting organizations, that they're willing to fund administration and the salaries of administration, or even the overall administrative cost. They make this arbitrary number of how much of your, I think it's 15% is when they granting organizations, particularly at the federal level, that it limit nonprofits. And that just, it depends on the nonprofit, right? And what they're doing. So there has been more flexibility with granting organizations and funding of capacity building grants so that organizations can grow and focus on the areas where they really need help and funding. HR and administration, HR is a key component to the success of any organization, any company. And so to be able to fund those things, I think, are very important. And we're making progress with granting organizations in that area.
Yeah, I think that's why a book like yours, Nonprofit Manifesto, is as important for for-profits to understand. Seriously, very serious, as it is for nonprofits. Nancy, what can our listeners do to help support your effort?
Well, certainly, as you said, buy the book. It's on Amazon, of course, and write a review. But also, if they're looking for someone to help them with their strategic planning, I would love to have a conversation with them about that. Or if they know of another organization that's struggling. I do a lot of kind of helping organizations that are struggling in whatever area. I love to do that because I have all this wealth of knowledge and experience and all the lessons I learned the hard way. I'm happy to share what I learned so that they don't have to do the hard learning, but can just learn from my mistakes.
What I'd love to do is, have you come back on. Of course we would. And bring in a couple of clients.
Okay. Oh, fun.
I think Casey's coming in anyway for some other stuff. But bring in some of the ones that maybe we haven't heard of before. You mentioned a couple of them. So you shoot me a note down the road and we'd love to have you come back in. And here's the street cred of this stuff actually works. Good seeing you again, Nancy. Congratulations on your book, Nonprofit Manifesto, and everything you're doing for your nonprofit coaching.
Thank you.
And I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. You've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest running community podcast, now in our 19th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, over 60 years of doing great things in San Diego County. Thank you so much. My guest co-host, Kristen Blake, she is a public relations and community affairs consultant, and we hope you enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.